A very good morning to all of you, and warm welcome to the third Joint International Conference on Tourism, Hospitality, and Sustainable Development Goals, a virtual conference organized by National Institute of Tourism and Hospitality Management, Hyderabad, India, in association with Wisdom University of Applied Sciences, Latvia, Lusofona University, Portugal, People Are Culture Organization from USA, Luxor University from Luxor in Egypt, Takodia Technical University from Ghana, the Engineering and Pedagogical College of Dushanbe, Tajikistan, University of Birjan from Birjan, Iran, College of Tourism and Service of Andijan, Uzbekistan, University of Food Technology from Bulgaria, Maulana Azad National Urdu University, Hyderabad, India, Jawaharlal Nehru Technological University, Hyderabad, India, and British University in Egypt, from Egypt. And this particular organization is, conference is planned for 3 days from 16th to 18th, 2022. As you all know that we have been facing so many several challenges, particularly the socio-economic and environmental issues throughout the world in terms of poverty, malnutrition, gender inequality, climate change, loss of biodiversity, and so on. In this regard, we realize that the concept of sustainable tourism, sustainable development in general, and particularly the sustainable tourism would contribute to achieve the broader goal of sustainable development, in which the tourism plays immense role in overcoming the mentioned socio-economic challenges. In doing so, the world leaders have recognized the importance of SDGs and the tourism contribution to achieve sustainable development goals. In this background, aim of the conference is to provide a platform to the wide range of scholars, policymakers, practitioners, and the other tourism stakeholders to discuss, debate, and deliberate on the role, issues, and challenges of achieving sustainable development goals through tourism and hospitality, and approaches and practices of sustainable development goals in tourism and hospitality related fields, and make it more responsible and visible to the public. This will certainly help the researchers across the field to come together and exchange the research and innovative idea among the academic community and the practicing entrepreneurs. It is in this regard we have planned a 3 days conference with various panel discussions starting from today. And before that, we have an inaugural program in which we have a keynote sessions addressed by Professor Ahmed Rashed from British University in Egypt, from Republic of Egypt. And the second keynote speaker, we have Dr. Shem from Kenyatta University, Kenya. Then we have a panel discussions in the evening, 7 p.m. Indian Standard Time, on cultural heritage, tourism, and sustainable development goals. And another panel discussion tomorrow at 7 p.m. Indian Standard Time on digital tourism and sustainable development goals. And the third panel discussion is scheduled on 18th February at 6 p.m. Indian Standard Time on retrospective perspective on the Indian tourism and hospitality research in the global space. Particularly, aim of these panel discussions is to contribute the broader goal of sustainable tourism in general, and particularly a contribution to the goal of sustainable development, 17 SDGs, in which we have the inaugural program addressed by, it's going to be addressed by our beloved director, Dr. Chinnam Reddy Garu. Dr. S. Chinnam Reddy Garu is working as a director, National Institute of Tourism and Hospitality Management, and he has a PhD and MPhil in Operation Research from Gujarat University and Osmania University, respectively. Before joining NITHM, he was a Dean, Faculty of Management, Marwadi Educational Foundation Group of Institutions, Rajkot, and also Dean, Faculty of Management, Gujarat Technical University, Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and several other institutions. As a director and professor, he was also a director and professor at S.K. Patel Institute of Management and Computer Studies in Gandhinagar, Gujarat. Having a vast experience in academics since 1992, he has been mentoring students and faculty for over 3 decades. Dr. S. Chinnam Reddy has joined in NITHM in the year 2016 and working with a vision to make NITHM as a globally renowned institute of excellence for tourism and hospitality education, research, training, and consultancy. So with this, I would like to welcome our director, Dr. S. Chinnam Reddy Garu, to give an inaugural address for this particular conference.
Thank you, Mahendar. Professor Ahmed Rashed from Egypt and Dr. Shem from Kenya and other faculty fraternity from across globe, as well as the student community from across other different colleges. First of all, I should thank everyone for participating into this third joint international conference on tourism, hospitality, and sustainable development goals. Initially, we thought of keeping it's a offline mode, but as you all aware that since almost 2 years, we are suffering because of this COVID, and it become very uncertain for everyone traveling and other issues like that. And we kept in the virtual mode. And I hope that everyone is able to get learning from this program. So as you all aware that the main theme of this conference is that what is the strategic development goals, sustainable development goals, and what is its impact on our tourism, basically. And as already Professor Mahendar told that, like we got a 17 SDGs are there, and out of which year how we can able to take into this one, and that is why this conference spread into different panel discussion. The first one today, after this keynote speakers, evening we are going to have on the cultural heritage, tourism and SDGs, and tomorrow we are going to have on the digital tourism, and next we are going to have a perspective on the Indian tourism and hospitality research in the global space. As you regarding our campus is concerned, I think the speakers visited our campus earlier in the conference, but I'm just trying to tell you this campus spread over around 26-acre campus. What I'm saying is that this looks like a true resort type, where we have got a natural, the lake, one of the oldest lake is here, and we got a natural forest is there, and we got a natural mountain is there, part of this campus. And that makes completely the true, if you take a tourism space, part of this campus is concerned. Now, regarding the SDGs also, as you know, sustainable is a very, very important for long-term survival. We always believe in this one. And keeping this in our mind, I want to happy to share that today the whole campus is running on the solar energy. We kept a 200 kilowatt solar energy in 2017. Now I can tell you that whatever the investment we have done, it generally at least next 22 years we are getting the free electricity from the sun. So apart from this one, the water, the main resource for everyone, and this water also, we are tapping all the rainwater into our existing bore connections, so that is saving a lot of water bill from the government. And today I'm happy to share that we are almost saving a more than 13 lakh rupees approximately more than $17,500 we are saving every year only on the saving of this water. And we got a natural lake, we got desilted, and because of that, the community around our NITHM campus, they stopped water tankers. They, because every bore got generated, degenerated because of this thing here now, and they are completely using only the bore wells. And that way, we always believe that the sustainable development is a very, very important for any organization, even for any country also. So because of that, all keeping in this mind, we thought we should keep this SDGs part of our this conference. And I'm happy that the Professor Ahmed Rashid and Dr. Shem joined this conference as a keynote speakers, inaugurating with this one in this case. I'm very thankful to you, all of you, and I'm sure that you get a great learning from this conference. Once again, on the behalf of the National Institute of Tourism and Hospitality Management, I welcome you all to this virtual conference, and hoping that next year we are going to have the half-line in the campus itself here. I again welcome you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for re-emphasizing on the importance of the theme of the conference on tourism, hospitality, and sustainable development goals, and also discussing about not only theoretical aspects, but also the practice of a sustainable tourism, or the broader aspects of the sustainable development goals within the campus. With this, I now request Professor Ahmed Rashid to deliver a keynote speech. Before that, I would like to give a brief bio of a Professor Ahmed Rashid. Professor Ahmed Rashid is a professor, was the former head and of the architecture department at the British University in Egypt, and the founding director of Farouk Ebaj Center for Sustainability and Future Studies. Professor Rashid was the chair of architectural department, Mansoura University, Egypt from 2004 to 2008. And he has graduated from Asyut University in Egypt in the year 1984, and he got MSc from Asyut University and King Saud University, Saudi Arabia, and obtained his PhD in architectural planning and conservation from University of York, United Kingdom, and concentrated on public participation for Luxor, Egypt. He worked as a professor at the different universities in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. He got different scholarships, among which those the FCO managed by the British Council from the British government, the American Research Center in Egypt, the Chevening, or few of the scholarships. He has published about 80 academic papers in international conferences and published papers in international journals. Professor Rashid was the conference chairman on the first international conference at the British University, organized in the year 2010 under the title Future Intermediate Sustainable Cities, FISC. As a result, emerged the Center for Sustainability and Future Studies to be a research and development center to address future sustainability in terms of environmental, economic, and social aspects. Also, Professor Rashid was a chair of the second international conference at the British University, which was organized in the year 2016 under the title Mega Sustainable Projects Chance, Change, Challenge, and the chairman of the Green Heritage Chance, Change, Challenge, which was from 6th to 8th March 2018. Professor Rashid was the initiator for several international and national competitions and campaigns, taking leave competition for sustainable sustainable cities, hope and work competition for developing a Suez Canal region, civilization rise to build civilization campaign, and the use of graduation projects to find solutions to our national needs. Professor Rashid was the president of AGTBE, the Association for Graduate and Trainees from the Britain in Egypt, from the year 2013 to 2015. And now the treasurer of the association, board member of Egyptian Society of Architects from 2011 to date, and member of many other local, national, and international professional organizations. With this, I would like to welcome Professor Ahmed Rashed to deliver a keynote speak.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for this long introduction. And I'm sure that everyone here for the conference more than a personal, introduction. So I would like first to thank you for inviting me to deliver a keynote speech for the opening program of the third joint international conference on tourism, hospitality, and sustainable development. And greeting from Egypt and for all of the partners of this conference, respected conference. And I'm sure that we are hope that they are going very soon to meet either in Egypt or Hyderabad. I would like first to share a very short video, which is going to give a little bit what I would like to talk in my speech. Hope that everybody could follow this. Are you already recording this conference? I think the record is not working, but again, I will just start my video and I would like to be assured that it is already be listened.
It's our legacy from the past.
It is what we live today.
It's what we pass on to future generations.
It's what we strive to save, stone by stone.
It's a universal value, which we need to protect for the benefit of all.
In the past, we managed to decolonize our lands.
Now the time has come to decolonize our civilization heritage.
We demand the world to recognize us as the right holders of our heritage.
We demand an open and transparent dialogue to protect our heritage from all forms of exploitation.
We demand an international law that declares us the beneficiaries of our ancestors' civilization. We demand a declaration of civilization rights.
My civilization right.
My civilization right. Civilization right.
حضرت.
My civilization right.
So this is a very short shouting for our civilization right. It's not only for Egypt, but for many other civilizations, which is already 2 years ago. I was physically attending the second international conference at Hyderabad. And at that time, I was talking about civilization right to build civilization as an initiative, scientific initiative, covered or supported and sponsored by the Egyptian Academy of Scientific Research and Technology and administered by Farouk al-Baz Center for Sustainability and Future Studies. The initiative is trying to shed the light of the cultural heritage which was being removed or exploited by foreign museums and companies like Luxor, Las Vegas, or whatever, which generate a considerable profit or commercial profit without slightest return to the civilization which are considered the owner and creator of this cultural heritage. Today in your estimated conference, I would like to talk about one result of the Civilization Right Initiative, which is to have what we so-called universal or award day for civilization right. We all know that the United Nations designate specific days, weeks, years, and decades as occasions to mark particular events or topics in order to promote through awareness and action the objective and organization of the United Nations of the human being. These celebrations are declared by specialized agencies of the United Nations, such as the UNESCO or the UNICEF or whatever. And I think the civilization, the rights of civilization should already have a similar, like human rights or other rights, a day, and to be put on the agenda of the United Nations. And it needs this kind of scientific, meetings like the conferences to discuss, to have a dialogue, and then have a debate about those rights. So in order to have this one, I already stated two real, very solid issues related to the idea of civilization right. And I'm trying within, and I hope that everyone is going to have this kind of reject or accept the issue within a scientific, debate. We already have published an international reference book for civilization right, and I will be happy to send every one of you a digital copy of that book to be a base for our future debate or discussion about the issue. So, if we would like to have the idea of civilization right with these 2 points, I see that there is a right. There should be a right for every civilization, for those already benefit commercially, ethically, or moral from a civilization, and give return. And this return should be returned to the civilization in the home country of that civilization for the sustainability of the civilization. Like we already have in Egypt many pieces, very unique pieces like Rosetta Stone or Nefertiti statue or whatever. And okay, yes, it is something they said they promote our heritage, but on the other side, the heritage of the homeland and the places which has been discovered, those pieces has been discovered, suffering a lot from different angles from the population, whatever. And that's why even I started to ask for what we so-called the civilization rights tourist, to visit the place which you already have been, vacant, if we give an instant now, Rosetta Stone, the place which was being discovered as a Rosetta Stone is one of the citadels, and it is already neglected. On the other hand, Rosetta Stone is the jewel of the British Museum. So what people are suffering a lot on the place is supposed to be a visited place and has a very remarkable return. The other part of the civilization right, it's not only to blame the others. No, we as the owner of a civilization, we should elevate ourselves in a different, respected way to be able to be connected to your civilization, which you're asking for the right. So we have a duty. We have to work on it in our own country on different levels by awareness, by providing the basic needs for the community, and this community again could, support the country by understanding and the hospitality and the tourism activities and industry in our home country to host the community which they are going to visit the places. If we are able to have a return back, or at least we could have a similar connections virtually. So I used to say that from reality, now we have the virtuality to a new reality. So we need this kind of new reality by thinking and sharing together for what we so-called a universal day for civilization, as I said. So finally, I think that each and every ancient civilization whose circumstances coincide with Egypt, like India, China, Greece, Italy, Iran, Iraq, Bolivia, Mexico, Peru, and others, will have the same goal, which is to declaration of the World Day for Civilization Rights. I hope to all you a very fruitful and successful conference, and hope that next year we will be able to meet at Hyderabad, attending the 4th International Conference. Thank you, and best wishes from Egypt and from the British University. And I am open to everyone if you would like to have a further discussion about the issue which I just mentioned. And I will try to have a visit this year and this summer to the United Nations and to America to share and to have a discussion about what we so-called civilization right today at the United Nations. Thank you for everyone, and hope for you a very successful conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ahmed Rashed, about discussing on civilization rights of not only Egypt but also in general other parts of the world. Yes, it is important in order to highlight and recognize the importance of the cultural heritage, the artifacts particularly of the inheritance that we have in each country. With this, I would like to thank you once again for delivering a keynote speech. And I now request Dr. Shem to continue with the speech. Dr. Shem, are you there?
Mahendar sir, unmute sir.
Give me a moment. Dr. Shem is joining. Reddy slides ఏంది? Shem, please join. We are waiting for you. We are waiting for you. I'm actually just sent my PowerPoint to you. No, that's okay. But please join. Please join. Have you joined the Zoom link through the Zoom link? Yes, the Zoom link. I've joined there. Okay. Then I'll call. Okay. Yes. Hi, Shem, can you please raise your hand so that the technician can give access? Okay, sorry for the inconvenience. Yes, we have the second keynote speaker, Dr. Shem Wambugu Maingi. Dr. Shem is a lecturer in tourism at the Department of Hospitality and Tourism Management at Kenyatta University in Kenya. And Dr. Shem Maingi completed his PhD in tourism studies from Kenyatta University in the year 2014. He is Master of Science in Tourism Management from MY University in 2007 and a Bachelor of Commerce and as an honors degree from the University of Nairobi in the year 2002. He has been a lecturer at Keynote University for the past 11 years. And Dr. Shem Maingi has published 11 academic research papers and also several edited books. In 2021, he has co-edited a scholarly book published by Emerald Group. He is also expert member of the several international committees, including International Scientific Committee on Cultural Tourism of ICOMOS, as well as a member of IUCN WCPA, Tourism and Protected Area Specialist Group. Currently, he is pursuing a grant research on cultural ecosystem services and tourism post-COVID with heritage sites in Kenya. So to name few, membership is actively involved in Ecotourism Kenya, and also as a member with the British Institute of East Africa, as advisory panel African Landscape Network. So these are the few memberships and the active roles that is having at the moment. So I now request Dr. Shem to present a keynote speech.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether you can be able to hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. I hope everyone can hear you. Can you go to the first slide? Because you have started with fifth slide. Dr. Shem, you can go for the full screen. You can share the full screen of the PPT. Dr. Shem. Dr. Shem, can you hear me? Okay. Please wait a while. He's rejoining. I think he's having some technical issues.
I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. Please continue.
Could you kindly present my slides?
With the slide. Sure. I'll do that. Give me a moment.
Okay. Thank you very much. The National Institute of Hospitality and Tourism Management in India, in collaboration with the various institutions involved for this very insightful conference. And I will start by really looking at the concept of sustainable development, how this concept of sustainable development has really had an impact on tourism development globally. And I will start by going to the first slide, the introduction slide. I want to apologize for the slight problem I've had with my computer. We can start with the second slide. We can go to the introduction. And in the introduction, tourism, development globally. Kindly, you can progress to this next slide, please.
Give me a moment. Just a moment, Shem, I'm sharing full screen.
Okay.
I hope now you can see the full screen.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Okay. So we can go to the introduction, the previous slide. Now, human communities represent a vital resource upon which tourism all over the world thrives, owing to their natural and cultural landscapes. And to be able to sustain the communities that represent a very important resource in tourism globally, it's important to address the challenges facing human communities. For example, the climate change, the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as many other ecological, social, and economic challenges. So climate change, social injustice, economic meltdown, amongst other threats to the life support systems have heightened the need for international collaboration. And that is what the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development sought to address the challenges facing the life support systems, and to address that using that international collaboration. Sustainable development became the heart of global communities and environmental management, and it was firstly introduced by the UN World Commission on the Environment and Development, the WCED report on our common future in 1987. Can go to the next slide. Now, sustainable development was defined in the, sorry. Sustainable was defined as development that meets the needs of the present generations without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And that definition actually echoes very well with the current situation, the current context that we find ourselves with the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. The fact that we need not just to address the needs of our present generations, but for future generations. For future generations, how will they be able to address situations that we had currently? So since the 1987 definition through Agenda 21, a plan of action was designed by the UN Conference on Environment and Development, the Rio Conference in 1992, as well as there was need to develop a developmental approach that was all-encompassing, that would bring economic growth without compromising environmental protection and social security. That is by Mishra 2018. So the UNDP estimates that currently the COVID crisis would unleash a global human developmental crisis. And this crisis is going to have unprecedented impacts on societies, on communities, their livelihood, and as well as their well-being. And as we talk about sustainable development goals, it will be important for us to really focus on this pandemic and look at how we could address challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as future challenges facing human societies. So globally, statistics shows that economic growth actually fell. We had a decline in global economic growth, 3.2% decline in 2020, a GDP contraction of 5.6% in 2020. And this decline has had a significant effect on the working populations, as especially in tourism sector. And therefore, we've seen loss of livelihoods as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So as we talk about sustainability in tourism, we need to also address how do we sustain the tourism sector. You know, it's not just about developing sustainability in tourism, but also how to sustain this industry, the tourism and hospitality industry in the future to come. You can go to the next slide. So tourism in the African context, we've just to give a background in the African context, the UNDESA estimated that extreme poverty in Africa is rising, currently at 414 million people who are currently living at less than $1.9 per day. And the situation is not going to improve because the COVID-19 pandemic has had a significant effect, not just in the African economies, but also in the tourism economies. UNDP's Human Development Report shows disparities in income, where top 10% of the population in Africa and, you know, are receiving 48% of the national income, while the bottom 40% of the population receive 9% of the national income. And that's a worrying situation. And we need to really come up with a different approach, not just for our national economies, but also for our tourism economies. An approach, a bottom-up approach, that a sustainable approach for developing our tourism economies that ensures that communities are part and parcel of that tourism development framework. And therefore, we need to research. So vulnerabilities of tourism destinations. The vulnerability of tourism destinations in Africa have been widely recognized to various socioeconomic global health crises. Tourism in East Africa specifically is not really contributing significantly to communities. It's not well positioned towards community well-being, development, and the local economy. And therefore, the lack of a sustainable tourism model, has been a big problem in the African context. Therefore, making our tourism sector highly vulnerable to pandemics such as the COVID-19 pandemic. We can go to the next slide. Tourism in Kenya is a very important part, significant part of our economy, as well as our local development. Tourism has immense potential to harness developmental benefits. Tourism has a potential to promote biodiversity conservation in Kenya and increasing Kenya's participation in the global economy. And that has been witnessed by the recent statistics in 2019, where Kenya witnessed a 1.19% increase in tourism arrivals. We had the highest growth in 2019, just before the COVID outbreak, and a significant contribution to our tourism revenue. Tourism in Kenya supports 1.57 million jobs directly. And therefore, tourism in Kenya is a very important resource. And therefore, as we talk about sustainability in tourism, how do we sustain tourism in Kenya? So let's go to the next slide and talk a bit about sustainability issues. The impact of COVID-19 pandemic in Kenya, according to the UNDP report in 2020, articulating pathways of the socioeconomic impacts of the COVID pandemic in Kenya's economy, shows that there have been direct impacts. There have been direct, both short-term and long-term impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen a fall in wages and incomes, poverty increase. We have seen a health sector that has been overwhelmed, that is also rolling down to the not just the service sectors, which are which include the tourism sector, but also other sectors like the manufacturing, the financial sector, the logistics sector, the education sector that has been disrupted heavily. And as we go to the next slide, we can go to the next slide. These impacts can be categorized into three: the economic effects, social effects, and the environmental effects. In terms of the economic effects, in the short term, we saw trade imbalances, a drop in GDP, a drop in tax revenues, heavy local and foreign borrowing, losses of jobs and livelihood, a rise in poverty, a collapse of the demand and value chains due to the lockdowns and travel restrictions. In the short term, we saw a collapse of supply chains, of the tourism supply chains, because we witnessed, especially in Kenyan situation, we witnessed a closure of global boundaries. We experienced a debt problem because of the heavy borrowing. We started experiencing capital flights, closure of multinational hotels, disinvestments, stalling economic activity, low government spending. Government was spending heavily on the health sector. Government was not spending on tourism and hospitality sector significantly. And the spending in the sector was more in terms of, saving the sector from collapsing. We saw a heightened inflation, crippled foreign disbursements, and in the long term, economically, we are going to experience an economic recession, a collapse of the economy, a widening debt crisis, financial distress, a currency crisis, economic depression, stagflation, that is both stagnation of the economy as well as inflation of the economy. We're also going to have a recovery that will be a jobless recovery. And that is a challenge that we are saying. How do we sustain this tourism sector in the long term? And in this COVID-19 pandemic, how do we talk about sustainability without really addressing the issues that are directly affecting our industry? In terms of social effects, we saw a disproportionate impact on the vulnerable communities, especially the women and children, the youth, loss of livelihood, social isolation due to social distancing. We saw a lot of social stigma, politicized responses, misinformation, and heightened concerns on health and safety. In the short term, social isolation brought about social deprivation, breakdown of social services, breakdown of social institutions, especially due to the loss of livelihoods. We also saw a lack or, cases of depression, especially in our tourism sector, workforce, they were more concerned about losing their jobs, and mental health issues are a major issue. And in the long term, there are issues of social conflicts. We are facing that. We're going to face social inequalities, losses of livelihoods, losses of life, highly vulnerable communities, especially the tourism communities adjacent to our protected areas, tourism communities that are highly dependent on tourism. Also political tensions and social unrest. As we can go to the next slide. In terms of environmental impacts, we've seen an increase in biomedical wastes. Immediately, we saw an increase in masks, PVCs, syringes, gloves, gowns, and other PPEs. And there was an issue in terms of the waste management problem. Increased vulnerability to zoonotic pathogens. We all don't know when the next pandemic, and how the next pandemic is going to be, and whether this COVID pandemic will mutate into something else. Also, increasing single-use plastics. A lot of single-use plastics were being used for face coverage. Occupational health and safety concerns, especially for our workforce in the hospitality tourism sector. Haphazard disposal of PPEs and masks. Lockdowns. Though lockdowns also reduced our emissions significantly, but we had an issue of biomedical wastes. In the short term, we saw public health risks, uncontrolled dumping of single-use plastics, open burning, uncontrolled incineration, rise of toxins in the environment. Yeah, and in the long term, we are going to experience an ecological pollution, an ecological crisis in terms of pollution, a national health crisis, lung and heart diseases because of use of masks. Significantly, we are going to experience the issue of hazardous medical waste. People are using masks that are disposable continuously, and that actually is going to create a big challenge. We also have the issue of water pollution, soil pollution because of improper disposal of PVCs and PPEs. So we are going to have an ecological crisis if we don't address the impacts. And when you talk about the immediate interventions, in the African context, we are focusing heavily on the economic interventions, socioeconomic interventions. Yeah, we are focusing on SME support, cash transfers, income support. We are not really focusing specifically on the sustainable development goals. It's like our SDGs, our focus on SDGs, went on a back seat. We're focusing on economic recovery. Remedial fiscal and monetary pressure policy measures were instituted in different countries. Digitalization of African economies, for example, the use of cashless transactions to curb the spread of COVID-19. Adoption of CDC and World Health Organization guidelines. Yeah, and there were so many measures that were more in the African context, that were more economic. measures. But as we talk about COVID-19, how sustainable are these measures? How sustainable are these interventions in the long term as we talk about future generations? So what we experienced in tourism was a more of a cosmetic approach towards addressing the impact of COVID, and not a sustainable approach towards addressing the impacts of pandemics, not just in the tourism sector, but in the global economies. So when you look at some of the measures that really were instituted in the African context, I can say most of those measures in the long term, they would run us into an economic crisis, because how sustainable is, for example, tourism recovery funding? How sustainable is that? How sustainable are tax holidays? How sustainable are the fiscal and monetary policy measures? We have to think about long-term measures, sustainable development measures, and we have to always integrate sustainable development goals to ensure that transformative social human progression is not disrupted. And that's why I feel in our tourism sector, it's very important to address the sustainable development goals, and to integrate our COVID interventions towards, realizing the agenda for sustainable development. We can go to the next slide. So sustainable tourism, by definition, is one that establishes sustainable balance between environmental, economic, and social aspects of tourism. Plays an important role in conserving biodiversity. It attempts to minimize its impact on the environment, local cultures, and it will be available for future generations while contributing to generating income, employment, and conservation of local ecosystem. So that definition by the UNWTO is a very important definition, because it helps us not just to perceive tourism as a driver for sustainability, but it also helps us to perceive tourism, to sustain tourism for future generations. You can go to the next slide. So how do we perceive sustainability in the post-COVID tourism era? It is important to put sustainability at the forefront of tourism recovery planning. It is important to place sustainability and the sustainable development goals at the forefront of our policy and development and tourism development measures in the post-COVID era. Sustainable tourism should represent a balance between tourism development, enhancing ecological integrity, as well as maintaining local community and sustaining local communities in the post-COVID era. There is need to push our tourism supply chains to adopt sustainability, health, and safety measures, as well as adopt sustainability certification measures in the post-COVID era. We need to focus on circular economies that are regenerative, restorative by design, that aim to keep products and materials at the highest utility at all times. We can move to the next slide. So sustainable tourism is a very important, a very significant subject for tourism practitioners, for tourism scholars. How do we integrate sustainable tourism in our curricula, in our tourism practices? How do we ensure that sustainable tourism is not just about tourism's contribution to sustainable development, but also how do we ensure that we sustain this tourism for years, for future generations? And to be able to address that, you can go to the next slide. To be able to address that, we need to understand that sustainability requires that people are not only considerate of the future, but also the critical others. We need to look at the well-being of all living things and the interrelationship within the universe. We need to adopt appropriate, responsible, alternative, sensitive, authentic, and responsible tourism. Let's move on. And that alternative tourism has to address a number of issues. It has to address sustainable societies. How do we sustain our societies? That alternative tourism has to address a sustainable environment. How do we promote low carbon tourism, alternative tourism, ecotourism? How do we sustain economies? As we said earlier, it's not about the contribution of tourism to sustainable development agenda, but how do we sustain this tourism sector? And the framework by Pan et al. Is most appropriate as we so talk about sustainable development goals. How do we sustain our economies? And I hope that the presentations in this forum will help to really come up with a sustainable economic agenda for different tourism sectors. How do we sustain our tourism economies? And also, how do we sustain our cultural systems and our heritage? That is a very important framework for sustaining tourism in the post-COVID era. We can move on. So sustainable tourism is all about really, and if I talk about the framework developed in 2005 by UNEP together with UNWTO in the policy guide making tourism more sustainable, they came up with 12 goals of sustainable development agenda: economic viability, local prosperity, employment quality, social equity, visitor fulfillment, local control, community well-being, promoting cultural richness, physical integrity, biological diversity, resource efficiency, and environmental purity. All those measures are very important. As we talk about the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, we have to also we have to come up with an implementation strategy to implement the Agenda for Sustainable Development in our countries. We have to address these 17 goals specifically in a much more coordinated, much more integrated and inclusive manner. We have to address the problem of poverty, hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable energy and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequality, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water and on land, peace, justice and strong institutions, partnership for achieving sustainable development goals. And all these goals are very, very important. And to be able to realize these 17 SDGs, there are 5 major elements that are very important. We have to look at people as a very important component of sustainable development. We have to look at the planet, the environment, protect the planet, and its natural and cultural resources for climate and future generations, and climate for future generations. We have to talk about prosperity. We cannot be able to develop without prosperous and fulfilling economies and lives, especially in our local communities in Africa and beyond. We have to talk about peace. How do we foster peace, just and inclusive societies? Partnerships are very, very, very important. International collaboration, regional collaboration, and local networks are very important to address sustainable development as we address the COVID-19 pandemic and future pandemics. We have to partner with different stakeholders. We go to the next slide. So for us to create resilience, sustainable, socio-ecological ecosystem, Marquez et al. 2018 came up with a framework for, creating a resilient and sustainable system. And that resilient system should be able to absorb, recover, and adapt significantly. And even as we talk about the COVID-19 tourism, post-COVID-19 tourism recovery, we have to look at how to develop a more resilient system, a more sustainable system, and the future agenda. As you said, sustainability is an evolving agenda. Right now, it is very critical for us to talk about resilience, tourism resilience in our sustainability agenda. How do we create a resilient tourism sector so that next time we have such pandemics, we know what to do. We know how to address the economic disturbance, the environmental disturbance, and social disturbance. So Marquez et al. Came up with a very important framework for resilience and sustainability to climate change, and very important in our context. Can go to the next slide. So sustainability tourism, sustainable tourism recovery, according to Gaman and Patra 2020, is all about really focusing on tourism recovery models that adjust, that are more agile, and demand driven. And therefore, according to Gaman and Patra, they focus a lot on demand driven recovery as well as natural recovery models that really would help us to deal with disruptions in our tourism sector. And as we focus a lot on research on tourism recovery models, we have to address the sustainable development goals and integrate the agenda for sustainable development as a more sustainable option for tourism recovery globally. We can go to the next slide. So in this framework, we will have a socio-economic and ecological model. I propose a socio-economic and ecological model for sustainable tourism, destinations, and resilience in the post-COVID pandemic era. And here, my proposition will be not just a cosmetic solution, but for us to really integrate sustainable development solutions. For example, for the economic sustainability, it is important for us to have bilateral and multilateral economic partnership agreements, promote socially inclusive tourism, promote foreign direct investment in the sector. We need to focus more on the immediate impacts on economic recovery assessment. Economic recovery assessment. It's very important to address, to identify what has been the impact of COVID, for example, as well as other crises, like, for example, climate crisis. We need to discourage dependence We need to discourage import dependence. We need to come up with economically inclusive policies for the local communities, local economies. We need to rebuild our demand chains. We need to rebuild our value chains. And in the short run, we need to also rebuild our tourism supply chains, develop local industries, develop local capacities, encourage local tourism. We need to focus on debt restructuring, investment incentives, developing the local industries. We need to re-engineer, restructure, and reform our governance and ensure how we govern tourism actually we are governing tourism based on the agenda for sustainable development. We need to re-engineer and restructure our governance. In the long term, we need to focus on economic recovery and recovery planning. We need to focus on economic rejuvenation. The UNWTO came up with an tourism recovery strategy, global tourism recovery strategy. We need to focus a lot on economic recovery in our tourism sector that really addresses the issues that we've talked about. We need to talk about more collaboration with creditors, partnership with our creditors, especially in our economic partnership agreements. We need to focus on stimulus packages, economic stimulus packages, economic resilience measures. And we also need to review constantly our fiscal and monetary policies, because fiscal policies is all about substituting private spending with public spending. We need to review our policies, our fiscal policies, to make sure that they enhance the recovery, the tourism recovery strategy. In terms of social sustainability, we need to talk about social protection of vulnerable people. We need to talk about livelihood diversification, social capital and networking. We need to build social capital. We need to focus on social networks, treatment of affected people, public participation, public education is very, very important in tourism. We need to focus on social inclusivity, and social inclusivity is very, very important as a recovery strategy. We need to revamp our social services, focus on social institutions, for example, families, rebuild our trust in communities, focus on mental health issues, and we need to address social conflicts in the long term, social unrest, social equity. And especially when you talk about social conflicts, we need to address issues like the xenophobic effects, a lot of xenophobia and displacement of people due to the challenges of the COVID-19. We need to address the issue of protection of life and livelihoods, focus on vulnerable groups. And in our tourism recovery strategy, in terms of environmental, let's go to the next slide. Can we go to the next slide? Sorry. In terms of environmental impacts, we need to come up with a way of addressing COVID waste, for example. Sustainability should be able to address the current needs and the future needs. And in terms of addressing current needs environmentally, we need to really focus on the COVID waste management. Management of single-use plastics is a big problem, especially with the use of single-use plastics for PPEs. We need to focus on household, business, and medical waste management. We need to come up with waste management guidelines for tourism stakeholders. We need to focus on hazardous waste, landfills, and medical incinerators. And in the short term, we need to focus on waste management strategies in hospitality and tourism, biosafety and biosecurity guidelines, capacity building and training, especially in managing waste. We also need to really come up with policies on biomedical waste management. We need to come up with policies on biosafety and biosecurity, especially in hospitality and tourism, international tourism and travel. We need to comply to the BRS conventions on hazardous waste management. We also need to have a lot of international cooperation and coordination. So as we address sustainable development goals, it is important for us to look at how do we, and the most, and studies, for example, like Mao et al. Proposed a well-grounded approach towards tourism recovery, post-SARS tourism recovery. And, you know, we have studies like Bingel et al. That really looked at different countries preparing their tourism recovery strategies and curves that focus on impact drivers in light of COVID-19 pandemic. Costange 2020 focused on post-pandemic management and marketing. And that is very important because we have to really accept the new normal. We have to address the post-pandemic tourism for future generations and not just for the current developing interventions, cosmetic interventions for the current needs, but for future generations, we need to really deal with the post-pandemic tourism. According to Liu 2014, beyond the crisis, we need to really focus on resilience rather than recovery thinking. And that resilient thinking advocates for economic, ecological, and social systems that should be able to adapt and respond to the crisis. Let's go to the next slide. And that is well explained by Calgaro, Lloyd, and Domine Halls 2014. How do we deal with a sustainable way of ensuring that we develop as a resilient socio-ecological system? We need to look at issues like exposure. How exposed are we to various pandemics, both the population, biophysical environment, and built environment? We need to talk about how the sensitivity of our tourism activities, both the physical sensitivities, the economic sensitivities, our livelihood assets, human capital, social capital, physical environment, and also sensitivity from a governance perspective. Are our laws, policies, and governance processes adaptable to address these crises? And also we need to come up with a system adaptive capacity. We need to build our system adaptive capacity in terms of impact response, how mitigation responses, how are we in our tourism sector addressing issues like emergency response? How are we addressing issues like immediate aid provisions? We saw a lot of confusion, especially in our tourism sector. How do we address the issues of impact response? And also, how do we adapt in terms of policy interventions, planning alterations, their physical reorganization? Yeah. How do we talk about network fortification and come up with preparedness strategies? So Calgaro, Lloyd, and Domine Halls 2014 is a very important study that, if, for example, a tourism sector globally and also nationally can be able to come up with ways of managing this crisis and also ensuring that sustainable development goals do not just go to a backseat integrate our sustainable development goals towards achieving our vision, our global vision 2030. And that will be a very important way. So we need to focus on resilience thinking as opposed to recovery. In African context, we are talking about resetting, resetting our tourism. We are talking about reviewing our tourism strategies. We are talking about re-engineering our tourism to ensure that we are more resilient, we are more adaptable to the challenges that we faced in the year 2020 as a result of COVID-19. We need to review our agendas and expectations. We need to really address the issues, the shocks, the stressors, and this model is a very important model. I think there will be a lot of research, the post-pandemic research in tourism that is really important to be able to deal with such issues in the future. Go to the next slide. Next slide. So thank you very much. I think that framework, these are some of the references. I think the PowerPoint will also be maybe in the conference, there'll be a way of sharing the information. So, and we hope future research in the area. Thank you very much. Sorry for taking too much time.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shem. Thanks a lot. Thank you for emphasizing on emergence of a concept of sustainable development in general, and particularly the concept of sustainable tourism, and also elucidating on the impact of the tourism industry. And most importantly, discussing about on how and also resilience strategies or the recovery strategies. The resilience strategies that we need to adopt, and the implication for COVID-19 pandemic situation on the practice of sustainable tourism. So with this, I would like to request the participants to ask questions. I think we have one question already lined up. Maybe Mr. Sunit, can you read out the question so that Shem would, it is not just limited to Shem, even Professor Ahmed Rashed can also respond if any question is related to his topic.
Yeah, Dr. Shem, you have a question from Professor Rashed. So his question was, how are communities managing the community-based tourism products in Kenya? And what are the destination management organizations in place to ensure quality community-based tourism in Kenya?
Thank you very much. Communities, especially the tourism communities in Kenya, really experienced a heavy blow due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Most of these communities had really invested in tourism facilities. There was a lot of tourism, small and medium size tourism enterprises in most of our tourism.
No, that's good thing, sir. Yeah, you got whatever.
And we experienced a big challenge, especially in terms of ensuring that most of these communities don't just close their businesses. And there was a lot of government, especially the destination management organizations, like the National Tourism Organization, that is the Ministry of Tourism. There was a lot of government involvement in terms of providing loans and providing support to the communities. Though the support was not adequate, but we saw most of these businesses closing down. And even now, as we talk about tourism recovery, we have to really, that's why I said it's important to come up with a greater strategy. Right now, the government came up with a review of the tourism policy, of which I was involved in the validation of the national tourism policy. And the focus now has been on, reviving the tourism enterprises, the SME sector. The focus now has been on promoting the tourism, community-based tourism, as opposed to promoting tourism for the multinational focus, the multinational companies. So a lot of focus now in terms of tourism recovery are based on, especially in Kenyan context, reviving the SME sector, reviving the community-based tourism enterprises, and also reviving our tourism supply chain to be able to ensure that the local communities actually get back to their feet. Yeah, so that.
Thank you, Shem, for answering the question. We have another question from Simran Kashyap. The question is, what was the state of women's representation in Kenya or Egypt unorganized sector? Which segment had a higher percentage of women in them and why? And in that, there is another question that is related to post-COVID. Could you highlight on gender-based job losses due to COVID-19 after the recovery period? What advice do you have for women who are vulnerable group in terms of being more resilient now in tourism industry?
Yeah.
Maybe,
okay.
Please. You want to take a question? Then you can continue.
Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Shem, you can answer this.
Okay. On the issue of gender, women were highly affected, especially in our tourism sector, in our hospitality sector. A higher proportion of, in terms of gender distribution, a higher proportion of women in our hospitality sector. We have a higher proportion of women than men in the hospitality industry. And since the hospitality industry was affected, we saw a lot of challenges facing especially women, and there's a lot of research now focused on how to address the gender inequality issues, especially in the COVID era. How to address the vulnerability of women, and the issue of gender inequality is, as we said earlier, some of these challenges are evolving challenges. They are evolving. We cannot say that we are going to be able to solve these challenges because they are more intertwined with for example, poverty alleviation. How do we address the issue of poverty alleviation in the African context, in the Kenyan context, together with gender inequality, decent work, yeah, and how do we make sure that we protect the human rights, or the rights of women and the rights of children, for example. So all these are evolving challenges, especially now the COVID-19 pandemic escalated these problems. And we have to deal with the issues. The issue of zero hunger You know, we experience real hunger, especially in our tourism communities, because they were highly dependent on tourism. And to be able to address the challenges, we have to also understand the issue of, you know, like right now there is a drought. There is a drought in northern Kenya. Northern Kenya in the North Rift is an important tourism destination, and we have to address the issue of droughts, floods. For example, in the Rift Valley lakes, like in Lake Baringo and Lake Nakuru, we're experiencing floods that are climate related. The issue of climate change is also escalating the problem, making it even more severe for local communities. So as you talk about sustainable development, the agenda for sustainable development, we have to understand the interconnectivity and the severity of the challenge, especially in the developing countries, and how is it, you know, affecting developing countries. It's very, very important for us to understand the significance of this agenda for sustainable development, and deal with these issues in a much more urgent manner. So I can say that the gender issues are interconnected with poverty issues, interconnected with climate issues, and it's very, very important for us to focus our research agenda as universities towards addressing these challenges, and also working together with government, partnership between government and universities. In Kenya, we have what we call, we have a center we call the Global Disaster Mitigation in Tourism Center that is working with other different directorates all over the world towards addressing the issue of disaster recovery, disaster management. And that is an example of partnership. We are seeing a lot of polycentric governance in Kenya, for example, where we have multiple centers of governance, and all these where we are not just talking about role of government in governance, but also integrating the professionals, integrating communities in governance. And all these elements are very, very important. All these approaches are very important towards dealing with the critical challenge facing human communities, facing tourism communities, that is within the agenda for sustainable development. How do we deal with zero hunger, for example? We had a situation in Kenya where hotels they were giving food to local communities, you know, because there was real hunger in places like Lake Baringo, where you have tourism facilities that are wasting their food because there are no visitors. But the same food can also feed the hungry locals in that particular area. So we saw a lot of that, and we hope that in the future, and this conference will help give a platform for integrating SDGs in tourism and hospitality industry, and that would be really great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shem, for a wonderful answer. I now request Professor Ahmed Rashed if you would like to answer this question. I know that it's not your area of interest, but still, if you would like to respond, you are most welcome. If
Actually, thank you very much for allowing me to give. I'm not, as you said, an expert for tourism, but I could understand because somehow I have been connected with those who are working in tourism in planning for places in Egypt, especially for Luxor City, which is one of the unique places all over the world. I used to say that tourism is something which I understood that it is imported people, export people from place to another, and there will be cultural interact between communities for a limited time, or and then the community itself, which is going to receive tourists from here or there, they have to be prepared in a way that have this kind of hospitality for a limited time. Could be something true or could be something artificial, according to the adaptation of the community, the awareness of the community, and the type of tourism itself. We are in Egypt, we have different type of tourism. We have the cultural tourism, which is in the valley, and we have this kind of recreation tourism, which is all over the shores. We're going to have civil event. So this is again is going to be within Sharm el-Sheikh. So this is a bit different than the things which is going to be happening nearby the pyramid or nearby Luxor. Because within this you have a real community which is living nearby, and they need this type of different adaptation for the kids, for the women, for the people who are working when they will have tourists. And again, what is the expectations for the tourists when they visit a place and for the community which are going to host those? This is many of the issues. Okay, the climate change is something which is all over the world are sharing now. The SDGs is something which the world would like to share some principles, but again, there will be kind of personality between one place to another, and one community to another, and one type of tourism to another. So again, it needs this kind of creativity. And I said that, okay, COVID, even it gave us a lot of hard time, but sometimes it could give another good time for us to think how we could reinvent the tourism in many places in a different way rather than it was used to be. And this is something which, in this conference and other conference could be shared. It is not something like, it is not a book, it is a game. I used to say future is a book, is a game, it's not a book. It's not something to be written. It is something that has a lot of variables and a lot of challenges. And for the challenge, you need to have this kind of change, and you have a chances. And I think COVID, whenever it is, has a lot of difficult times, but again, it has a lot of chances that the world could now share together a lot of issues and experiences for the better future in the future. Thank you again for allowing me. And that's why when I say that I would like to have what's so-called Civilization Right Day, this could be one of the issues that we are going to talk about, the relation between civilizations and tourism, and to what extent this could be shared by the international community. And again, I will wait for the participant to share with me if they would like how we could do something. Again, in Egypt now we are all suffering for within the tourism industry. So it is not a matter of the gender, even it's going to be women or men or children, it's as a whole. And we hope that in the future, the very future, that, okay, we prepared ourselves in a better way than it was before. Thank you for that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Ahmed Rashed. I have a last question to you, and with that, we'll close the session. The question is, how can, I know that you have highlighted some of these aspects in the presentation, but still, how can we integrate and achieve the civilization rights through a broader goal of sustainable tourism and also 17 SDGs?
As I said that, okay, once again, I will give an example, Rosetta Stone within the British Museum. This is one of the example of a very unique piece of the Egyptian heritage, and I'm sure that Indian heritage will have many great pieces. Iraqi have many great pieces. All these pieces are, within the British Museum when they have 8 million pieces all over the world, and they said that we already have a civilization museum from all over the world. Okay, those places, there were, even the British Museum, if you're going to say that it is for free to visit the British Museum, but again, all the souvenirs and all the market and all the industrial, even to visit London, you will have partially a percentage of tourism related to the British Museum, related to the very unique pieces related to the Rosetta Stone. On the other side, the place which they discovered Rosetta Stone, which is Rosetta or Rashed, is suffering a lot. 2016, one of those sinking boats with a lot of immigrants tried to invade or to go to Europe because there is a less of jobs. So many of youths, and they unfortunately it happened that there was an accident, and 600 of those young youth already has been sent and died just in front of the place which Rosetta Stone has been discovered. The place itself could be a visiting place. It is not the place which they already have the Rosetta Stone. So if Rosetta Stone returned, or even the dream of returning Rosetta Stone within the community, which is having a lot of problems, this could be what we so-called civilization right tourism. It is one place, but we have many other places. And as our treasures all over the world, we could have this kind of connection. Okay, the people who are visiting the British Museum, they could virtually see the original place, which is Rosetta Village, and they could be supported and they could be addressed. One of the other things that the souvenirs which are already in the British Museum, it should be as a craft being, from Rosetta Place. So it could be an industrial for crafts, different rather than have things from other countries, or it could be handmade, it could be something like that. So for civilization right, as you said, that it needs these two folders. The first folder address that there is a right. It is not a return right now, but it's a right. Okay, for support the communities, they're unique. Already within the international museums, or even there is a lot of movies or hotels like Tucson, Las Vegas, or whatever. So they get, there is no copyright for the civilization because they said that it is something for public domain. It should be as if you are already have a profit, so there should be a return. This is one of the issues which you try, and you say that it's not a single story for the Egyptian civilization. No, Iraqi, Iranian, it is Indian, it is Chinese, it is many other places they have the same. The other thing that like to upgrade the communities which one a day they are the place which those heritage has been moved from a place to another, and there are many other places which are suffering, need restoration, we need awareness, we need understanding. So it needs
good afternoon, may I know yours?
From now, our kids, so it is going to be an education system, it's going to be an awareness system, it's going to be a campaign in many different ways. The civilization, right to civilization is something, and there are already a scientific debate and initiative, and it started to gain supporters and a lot of researchers and a lot of studies. And it's open for everyone to accept or to reject. So that's why I said that if anyone would like to have a copy of the book, it is written in Arabic and English, and I could send it to any one of you. I already put my email and ready for the debate. There is another stage which is called civilizology. It is the scientific, what we see called terminology for science created the civilization. This is another track I'm working on with colleagues, and it is going to be a coming, efforts, and I will ask for sharing. But right now, I'm concentrating on having what we so-called Universal Day for Civilization. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ahmed Rashed. With this, we would like to close up the session. And I now request Dr. Neeraj Gohil sir to propose vote of thanks. Okay, anyway, I think. Oh, okay, just a moment. Come here.
Vote of thanks. Very good afternoon, everyone. It has been such an honor to be a part of this inaugural session, virtual session for this third joint international conference on tourism and hospitality and sustainable development goals. And it's been an honor for me to propose the vote of thanks. So on behalf of the NITHM organization, our sincere thanks to our beloved director, Dr. Chinnam Reddy sir, who always be there as a source for inspiration and encouragement, and always giving support and continuous support for directions for strengthening the grateful gratitude to our speaker for today, Dr. Ahmed Rashed from British University in Egypt and Republic of Egypt, for sharing a wonderful thoughts about the concepts of rights of civilization. And I think really it's very true, because our existence depends on that legacy of the past, and we should feel pride and have such kind of sense for making it forward for the new generations. And also would like to thank another keynote speakers and our distinguished guest, Dr. Shem Wambugu of Kenyatta University, Kenya, for such an in-depth and wonderful kind of presentations, which gives definitely a true pictures about the tourism situations across the globe, and how the pandemic hit it in the really bad way. At the same time, he also highlights the significance and contribution of tourism in their respective country of Kenya. And I also thanks for showing such kind of their commitments, their country, for regenerating themselves and revitalizing again after the post-pandemic era of pandemic 19, and also suggesting such a wonderful models that how we can become resilient and in the futures to further go ahead for this tourism and hospitality industry. I must not forget to thanks our all other associate partners, academics associate partners like Wisdom University of Latvia, then Lufonso University of Portugal, then People and All Culture Institution USA, then the Luxor University of Arab Republic of Egypt, then also Takrodi Technical University of Ghana, and the Engineering and the kind of Pedagogical College of Dushanbe, Tajikistan, then University of Regent, Iran, and College of Tourism and Service of Adijan, Uzbekistan, University of Food Technologies, Provideo, Bulgaria, and also the National Urdu University of Hyderabad, and also the Jawaharlal Nehru Technological University of Hyderabad, India, for their kind support and showing the faith on the NITHM Institute, and also cooperation for organizing this joint international conference, and also showcasing the togetherness and for addressing such kind of sustainable development goals, challenges and awareness among the various students, scholars, and the stakeholders of this industry. And my special thanks to Dr. Mahendar Reddy, who always be taking the efforts and pain to start and initiate such kind of a conference and taking all the efforts to bring such a knowledgeable and esteemed speakers across the globe. So I thanks Mr. Mahendar also. And finally, I would like to thank to all of you presents virtually here for making the time to be with us today and helping us to make this inauguration session great. So thank you one and all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for thanks.
You missed the British University in Egypt.
It was a great time to have you all, and it would be great if you could join the next session at 7 p.m. Indian Standard Time. So I request Professor Ahmed, Rashed, and other members and the participants to join the evening session at the panel discussion 1 on cultural heritage, tourism, and sustainable development goals. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
National Institute of Tourism and Hospitality Management, nurturing excellence, serving success.